AJ, I've been following your life since a long time, and I've noticed that you've seen a lot of success, and at the same time you've seen a lot of challenges. After all these years, how have you perceived happiness?
Good question, Samar. Happiness, by definition, is a good thing. People pursue it, they chase it, and in pursuing happiness, they get unhappy. So that's the one part that doesn't make sense to me. It's an emotional response to something that happens outside of you. So something needs to happen which will make you happy. Your child does well in school and that makes you happy. Your husband brings you a gift that makes you happy. Your number arrives in a lottery and you make money that makes you happy. If you're working, you get promoted, that makes you happy. Your boss praises you, it makes you happy. So all these things have one thing in common, that you are dependent on something else to make you happy.
True.
Right? So that dependence is the one that gets to you eventually. Because if you are dependent on some external activity to make you happy, there comes a time in your life when those activities don't happen. Right? So now what happens for 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, if nothing is happening outside of my life that's making me happy? What do I do in those 2 years? And mostly people react very negatively to that. And then they chase happiness with even more aggression, and that doesn't work. So my advice to everybody listening would be is to develop a system within you that you are not dependent on anything outside of you happening that makes you happy. For that you need to forget the word happiness and you need to adopt the word joy.
What a beautiful word.
Anna? So you have to actually look for joy rather than happiness.
You're reframing the word.
Absolutely.
Joy.
If you look in the dictionary, especially in the Urdu dictionary, and if you look at joy and if you look at happiness, the definition is the same, it's khushi. What the dictionary doesn't describe is the source of that khushi. When you're talking about joy, the source of the khushi comes from the inside. And when you are talking of happiness, it comes from the outside. There's nothing wrong with khushi coming from outside. The problem is when it stops coming, because life is not all fair, right? But when it comes from the inside, then you're in control. And so how do you do that? People ask me then, how do I convert happiness to joy? That's a development of your personality. When small things make you happy, when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling okay, you know, makes you happy.
Morning cup of tea.
Yeah, your morning coffee makes you happy. You go outside and you hear a few birds and that makes you happy. You go to office and you find a few colleagues happy. Their happiness makes you happy. So joy is something that becomes a part of your personality. It takes very little to give you joy. Everything happening around you gives you joy, and you can't have joy unless you have gratitude.
Of course. How would we miss gratitude?
Right?
Of course, yes.
So you have to have gratitude. If you are grateful for what you have joy. You know, there's always that one thing you feel, if I get this, I'll be happier. There's always that one thing. And the trick in joy is never to need that thing.
Fantastic.
Never to need it. You know, there is that one thing. Whatever much you have, if I have 3 cars parked in the garage, I will want that 4th one because I feel that that's the one that's going to give me happiness. But not wanting that 4th car or the 3rd car is what will convert that to joy. So my advice, since I talk to the youth a lot, I just tell them, I said, okay, and you know, in Pakistan especially, I get very saddened that we are now very angry by nature. We are an unhappy nation. When I post a picture on Twitter and that picture has 9 good elements and 1 bad element, a majority of the people will pick the 1 bad element. And they'll say that, you know, this is what's wrong with this picture. And I said, no, this is what's wrong with you.
So that's what I was trying to say. Is that human nature? Are we designed like that?
Well, no, we're not designed like that. And yes, it is human nature, but human nature eventually, not eventually, but always is in your control. You can't blame anybody for what you are. So, you know, when there's a word I use in my training that if you are not interested, nothing will look interesting. Pehle interest to paida karo yaar. Because if you're not interested, nothing in the world will be interesting. You can come and say this happened, that happened, this happened, and it will not interest you because your personality, you're just not interested.
So that's a long way to go.
Yes,
to develop that interest.
Absolutely.
What must one do?
Okay, it's not a quick fix, you're absolutely right. But look, it took us a long time to get to this stage also. We were a happy nation. We were a satisfied nation. We were a content nation. Everybody was happy with what they had. There was poverty in Pakistan 30 years ago. There was poverty in Pakistan 40 years ago. But people were happy within that poverty. They found joy within that poverty. You had poverty, now you have poverty and anger. Now you have poverty and dishonesty. Now you have poverty and character pollution. You know, so poverty, you've added a lot of other stuff to poverty, which has made the bearing of poverty very difficult. Poverty is एक मुश्किल काम है भाई, गरीब होना एक मुश्किल काम है, लेकिन we've made things worse for ourselves. If I was to ask a kid who's got a good job that if you had a choice, which company in Pakistan would you want to work for? And I do this as an exercise because I'm a trainer. And some kid is working for a blue chip or a real nice multinational. 90% of them mention every company except the one they're working for. Now, how sad is that, And I said, look, you've got one of the best jobs there is. You're in a multinational, international company. People would die to get this job. And when I asked you, which company would you like to work for, you never mentioned your own. And that is the element of dissatisfaction. And when you walk into that company, this is from the outside, and when you walk inside that company and you see a girl from marketing or somebody from some other department, and you ask that person, hey, you work for this beautiful company, if you had a choice, which department would you like to work for in this company? And 90% of them don't pick the department they're working for. So imagine the misfit. Imagine how the puzzle is not fitting together. That 90% of kids are working in companies they don't want to, or at least they think they don't want to. And within the company, 90% are working in departments where they don't want to. So this general level of dissatisfaction is not because salaries are bad, it's not because benefits are bad, it's because internally we've become dissatisfied, we have become unhappy. nothing pleases us anymore. And whatever does please us, the shelf life of that happiness is very brief. In 2 weeks, you'll get over it. So what I was trying to tell you is that, we've become angry, we've become dissatisfied, we've become greedy. Like there's an old saying that there's enough for everybody's need. There's never enough for everybody's greed. So all these things eventually get connected to happiness, I remember when I used to arrive at the dining table when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was happy that there's food on the table. And my kids will be unhappy because the food that they like is not on the table. So now there's nothing wrong with that, because this is a generation of evolution and generations will change and you can't fight change. And all I'm saying is that the tougher things get outside, because outside things are now very difficult. The employment market is difficult, surviving financially is difficult, general conditions are difficult. So when everything is difficult, my question to the youth is, why would you make it more difficult for yourself? भाई ऑलरेडी इतनी मुसीबतें हैं, एक और मुसीबत तो अपने गले मत डाल लो ना, थोड़ी हैं मुसीबतें बाहर. So they now need to overcome this with exactly the reverse of what they are doing. And that is that yes, things are tough, but we will handle it. It's like somebody said many years ago, Zindagi idhar aaja, hum tujhe guzarenge. हम तुझे गुजारेंगे, ऐसी कौन सी बात है, इधर आ जा. So yes, happiness is a nice thing. It gives you a lot of good feelings, good vibes. But there's a downside to happiness also, and that is, how much of it do you want? Because if you want 10 ounces of happiness and you get 9, you'll be unhappy. Now you'll be unhappy after getting 9 ounces of happiness. So those 9 have not made you happy, that one that you didn't get made you unhappy. So we need to first reassess ourselves, that what are we seeking? And then this dependence on other factors, on outside world, needs to lessen. We need to develop ways to be happy without any reason. Small things need to make you happy, My granddaughter, if she's 6 years old, if she gets 3 A's in her kindergarten, that will make me happy, but I shouldn't be depending on those 3 A's. I should be depending on her playing in the yard outside. And that's what should make me happy, because it's possible she may not get those 3 A's. As a matter of fact, she may get 3 C's. Then what do? Do you really get unhappy? So rather than make benchmarks for myself, why don't I get happy when she's just playing? Or when my grandson is having his food and he's making a mess of himself and there's food all over his hair, that should make you happy. You're
trying to say it's the small minuscule
exactly
which actually make you happy. So our focus should be on the
absolutely. And Samar,
the day-to-day.
Exactly. And since I've been a hospitality person all my life and I teach hospitality, I teach this to hospitality management people, that when a customer comes to your hotel, it's not any one thing that makes him happy. Okay, something happened, dramatic happened, and now he's a happy person. From the moment he enters that hotel, small things start happening. From the bellboy saying Salaam Alaikum, to everybody being polite, nice, and he keeps putting it in his happiness basket. And after 2 days, when he's leaving the hotel, nothing has happened. And it's been a normal thing. But so many small happy things in his basket that when you ask him, how was your stay? He would say, it's a delightful one. I loved it. And then you say, what happened to make it delightful? And he won't be able to answer you because it's the small things. When he turned on his water, the hot water came quickly rather than him having to wait 5 minutes. When he asked for coffee, a nice hot cup of coffee came. It was the one that he wanted. The food was well cooked. Housekeeping staff came and said Assalamu alaikum to him. So small things. Now the reverse is also true. An unhappy experience doesn't mean that one bad thing has happened to you. The false ceiling will not fall on your head, but a series of small bad things. Now he starts putting that in his unhappy basket. And after 2 days, if you ask him how his stay was, he's probably going to say it was terrible. And then when you say, what happened? And he won't be able to tell you what happened because nothing singularly happened that destroyed his stay. It was a series of small things. He went for breakfast, the salt and pepper shaker was there, and there was no salt in because some staff member in the morning didn't check both of them. So he put salt on his omelette and he said, excuse me, can you, there's no salt in it. That guy in 2 seconds gave him a new one. Problem solved. But that went into his unhappy basket. Small thing. So a collection of bad things make it an unhappy experience, and a collection of happy things make it a good experience. This exactly the same is with life. Nothing dramatic happens in our life. That, of course, dramatic things do happen, you know, but like I'm saying, that don't depend on those dramatic things because they don't happen often. The smaller things happen every day. And if you can't drive happiness from the smaller things, then wait for 5 years. If I get a job, it'll be 4 years before I get promoted. So what do I do with 4 years? Get desperate, frustrated? But if going to work makes me happy, you know, my wife always used to tell me, still does, that every time you leave for work, you're happy.
What a beautiful thing to say.
Because the general perception is, you say, kya musibat hai yaar, main naukri pe ja raha hu. And she said, every morning when you were going to work, it seemed to me that you wanted to go. So just, obviously when you get to the office, there's a lot of pressures, there are lots of nice things happening, a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, but in the morning you still want to go. And imagine if you're going to sleep saying, कि यार सुबह उठ के दफ्तर जाना है, क्या मुसीबत है. So what will your day look like? When it starts with regret, कि यार, I mean, I have to go to work, which is the last thing I want to do. So then the prescription is that you're going to be unhappy all day long. No? So bottom line, and this is what I tell everybody that I teach, that develop happiness within and therefore develop joy within. The more things in the world that will give you joy, the better you will be, the happier you will be. Happiness is a nice thing, but it depends on other people. You'll be surprised how many people would walk out of the house and not even notice the rainbow. They will sit in the car and drive off. And there'll be some people who look at the rainbow, they'll take out their mobile phone and somebody is screaming from the car, "Jaldi karo, der ho rahi hai," and they say, "2 minute khair jaye." And they go click, and they go click, and they go click, and it's posted on Twitter and it's posted on Facebook. It's a rainbow. They can take a picture of the rainbow from Google. The internet is full of millions of rainbow pictures, but you value the one that you took. And you share it with all your friends and say, "Hey, I live in Model Town. Guess what I saw this afternoon after the rain? I saw a rainbow." Now tell me how cool that is, how beautiful that is. And yet, there are millions of us that will sit in the car and drive away and not even notice. And even if somebody tells them there's a rainbow, they'll say, "Oh, so be it."
But it's a beautiful thing, deriving your happiness from nature.
Yes. Yeah. From anything.
More what you're talking about is more of a habit change. And
Exactly.
Homework,
Exactly.
working on yourself, one baby step at a time.
Exactly. When I teach success, I tell people that successful people, success is a collection of habits, not skills. There are millions of skillful people in the world, but you'll find a handful of successful people in the world because they have the right habits. So, seeking joy is a habit. And, even the craziest thing that would, that give you that joy. And that's a lot better than waiting for that big thing to happen, your prize bond number coming and you're making money, or you're getting promoted, or your son gets 9 A's. That will happen also. But what is the frequency of that happening? It's very rare. So if that frequency is rare, what do you do in the other times when that is not happening? You're unhappy, you are angry, you're bitter. You shouldn't be. Because, you listen to a song and you should be transported. I remember my father, he walked into, I'm the only child, and I was sitting in a room, I was 11 years old, and he came and said, what's happening? He asked in English, and I responded in English saying, I'm getting bored. And instantly he said, getting bored is an insult to yourself. Why would you get bored? Do you need entertainment? I spent a lot of time alone in my house. For hours and hours, I'm in my room and I'm not doing anything. I'm not watching a movie or something. I'm just lying in bed. And my children opened the door and said, Abba, what you're doing? And I said, nothing. And they said, how can you do nothing for 3 hours? Because they can't conceive doing nothing for 3 hours. They are in the activity syndrome. They need to have activity 24/7. Abba doesn't have to. I'm just, my imagination is what drives me. Like I said, when I tell parents, I said, when you're with children, don't teach them. Learn from them. How can you not learn from a 12-year-old? You give him one piece of stone and he makes a world around it. Wow. You don't want to learn from him? You just give him one piece of stone and he will sit there and for an hour he'll draw an entire world around that one piece of stone. So how can you not learn from him? And here we are given the entire world and we don't value it as much as a stone.
Look at the imagination.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, look at any kid. You give him anything, one small toy, one small thing, and in his mind he'll draw an entire world. So when you're with kids, it's time to learn, it's not time to teach.
AJ, tell us of something which has happened recently which has brought you a lot of happiness.
Every day. Every day I wake up and it gives me joy. Why? Because I feel that God is not disappointed in me yet. And
you're a lucky man.
Yeah, that He is giving me one more. The other thing that gives me, because I teach and train, making a difference in people's life, nothing is more rewarding than that. And the strange thing is that I taught kids 30 years ago, and they would run into me at the airport, and this man would be head of visa for Middle East and Africa, and he said, I was your student. And I don't recognize him. Obviously, I can't recognize my students. And he introduces himself, and he obviously says thank you to you and gives you his card, and he leaves. And you look at the card, and then you say, hey, I did this. So that's the ownership. And there can be no bigger reward than making a difference in people's lives. So that's what happiness is for me.
Thank you so much, AJ. It's been a pleasure. hearing all what you had to say, and I think you will make a lot of difference in everybody's life.
Thank you so much for having me.